Okay, welcome everyone to this week's episode of yet another Sixth Dimension with Nathan Hill. Nathan, welcome.
Good evening.
It is a dark and stormy night, so you better prepare in your Vincent Price voice as best as possible.
Man, is this going to be technically 101, or have you already done a couple since I spoke to you?
Oh, we've done a couple, unfortunately, since I've spoke.
Oh, that's excellent. Thank you for having me once again. And you said recently that you had enjoyed watching my films when I was in them.
I'm having Nathan on again because I recently watched a film of his called Radio Samurai. After noting that I seem to enjoy his films when he's at the center of it, when he's the centerpiece. And he illustrated that, this was one of his very first film roles that was actually nationally distributed. That got a lot of media attention. That was, I guess, his debut in a starring role. Is that correct?
That is very correct. This was technically a second lead in a major, commercial feature film. It was distributed through Shock in Australia and New Zealand. Probably a couple of thousand units that sold out almost immediately. But it filtered into every store. I mean, I think it was my sister that picked one up in Kmart, and someone else got one in Target and someone else got one in JB. Like, it really was quite popular. And I think probably at the time due to Brooke Satchwell as well, because at that time she had won the award for most popular teenager.
Which isn't creepy at all.
Well, that's the director's casting, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm an actor.
No, not from you. I mean, it's just the notion of there being a most popular teen or something like that. I don't know.
Most popular teenager. Now, you've got to put it in context though, because when she did the movie, I think she turned 21 on set.
Okay. Yeah.
But she'd won an award, I don't know if it was previous or during that time, for most popular teenager in a role on television. So I'm thinking it was probably Neighbours.
We'll provide a little bit of context because Brooke Satchwell was pretty huge back in like 97 to 2002 in regards to Neighbours. Everyone I knew had sort of a crush.
Every schoolboy's crush.
Yeah, exactly. She was down to earth, but she was sort of strong enough to, I guess, stand on her own with her own personality, as opposed to some of the pushovers in Neighbours that still are still even on air today. That goes to prove the strong don't survive, in some soap operas in Australia. But yeah, Radio Samurai, it was put together around this time. So I guess we'll start with what Radio Samurai is about.
Radio Samurai is a hyper-reality comedy that follows the adventures of hip disc jockey Gene Roseberry. After losing his job and breaking up with his girlfriend, Gene resolves to do whatever it takes to get them back. He teams up with his best friend, John Reese, a.k.a. Nathan Hill. And together, this comedy duo charge through absurd situations and action-packed stunts on their way to the massive dance party spectacular. Only by joining the party will you discover Gene's fate and find out why comedy has a new warrior.
Now, that premise didn't really sell me, to tell you the truth. What did sell me was actually the Brooke Satchwell thing. Because, I mean, I was like, hang on,
wow.
What exactly is this thing? I mean, it was part of your filmography, so naturally I was gravitating towards it. And I had heard of it previously, mainly because the DVD was at the video store where I used to work, and it had Brooke Satchwell's name on it. And it brought back all of these memories. But I didn't know it was associated with you.
Well, I am on the cover, and it's interesting because you've got Rook and I on one side, and then you've got Stuart and Joanna on the other side, who are the other co-leads. So it was very interesting, the marketing and just watching that process. Here I was as an actor, seeing my first lead role being kind of packaged. It was interesting to see even the artwork progress, and because I was heavily involved, I got to see the evolution of how it became a DVD. And back then, that was a very special time because that's when the industry was really just booming. The initial distro, really liked Brooke, much like what you're talking about, and I think was definitely one of the reasons that it got the release. I mean, I'm sure they would have done it anyway, but having her in it was a great addition.
And so how exactly did you get the role of John Reese, which is a really classic 1980s name, and I think...
Well, yeah, man, it turns out that actually the character, and I found this out later, was actually based on one of the director's friends, a friendship he had with a guy who I think might even have the same name with just a different spelling of one letter. And this guy apparently was a bit of a player. and he was a nightclub guy, and he was good with the ladies. And when Nick was writing this character, he kind of gravitated towards me because his experience with me when we went out, well, I guess, was similar. But initially, that wasn't the case. Like, he brought me in because I was a filmmaker, and he had watched my film The Hidden, which you know of.
Yep.
He had then gone and made his own low-budget first VHS movie called Duplicity. So Nick and I had both done our kind of first SOV video, or SOV movie, I should say. And then he was sort of taking the next step to make this first proper commercial feature, because we'd had a kinship and, believe it or not, had met first working together in a Video Easy chain. So we were already friends and had even done some shifts together. So we were sharing movie knowledge and spitballing and getting along like house on fire, and found through our chats that we even had 2 ex-girlfriends that had also been friends.
Wow.
And they used to talk about us both separately, and they'd, like, I'd be with my girlfriend and her friend, and they'd be talking about Nick, and then vice versa, they'd be talking about me. So it was a real kind of meant to be, one of those really, really amazing coincidences. But when he went to do the auditions, he said, Nath, can you please come in and assist me on this day, because I'm literally going to see hundreds of people. Like, he'd done a casting call and there was massive response. He was actually running the auditions at a room he'd hired out somewhere in Melbourne Uni on campus. We went into this room, and all I remember is I had this shocking hangover. And I spent some time with him, then sometimes in the other room trying to recover from this hangover. But as we went through all these reads, these cold reads, and I was doing response reads, and a lot of it was for the John Reese character, something happened in the audition room when there was another girl that came through, which ironically was the only family member of his to audition, which was one of his cousins called Lauren. And I just thought she was absolutely stunning, this girl. And we just clicked. We had a chemistry. And so within that process, he cast us both on the spot. He said, okay, well, you're going to be John Reese and she's going to be the French love interest, Lauren Guerry, the French girl. But then that, I guess, was kind of like giving him the roots to the project.
Sure.
And I think he felt comfortable from there to then to, for the tree to grow from those roots, so to speak.
So what was the process after you got cast like? Was there a rehearsal process? Was there...
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was lucky because I was one of the first to get cast. I got to see, even as an observer, sometimes over Nick's shoulder. Every now and then he'd say, Nath, what do you think of her? What do you think of him? And I'd be like, well, he's good and he's not, and she is and she isn't, whatever. I didn't ever try to sway him, though. But I remember right towards the end him sort of saying, look, I'm down to these couple of guys. Who would you cast? And I had actually brought in Joanna, who's the lead female. I had been acting with her in acting classes back then at the Academy of TV, and she was genius. We really clicked. And I said, Jo, you've got to come and do this audition. And she thought I was just being an idiot mucking around. She's like, oh, yeah, whatever, Nath, yeah, whatever movie. She didn't realize it was a legit feature. So when I brought her in to meet Nick, she was kind of shocked. I said, have a higher opinion of me, will you? And, she did pretty well after that. She got some major commercials with dialogue, and she made a lot of money, after this film. She did really well. I don't think she's acting now, though. I think she went more down the music path, in fact.
Okay.
But yeah, so, sort of having a big influence on the female lead and already being there myself, and then him having brought his cousin in, who actually is an excellent actress. It was a legit audition, and she nailed that role. There was no one else that did better than her. So the last puzzle really was the main. I'd said to Nick even in the script, that's not me. That's not my character. As a parallel, I kind of likened it to, and as an actor, I kind of liken it to what Robert Downey Jr. is in Weird Science. That's how I saw John Reese. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. I can actually imagine that as you speak. I was watching Back to School and Weird Science, both as a double feature the other week.
Awesome.
It's amazing how sort of natural Robert Downey Jr.'s character is in front of the camera, how sort of suited to being in front of the lens. And that sort of natural party boy vibe that he gives off as a character is more of a based on real life than it is a made-up character. And you at that time were sort of I guess, a bit of a party boy yourself.
I think any young actor, 20s, and being involved in the industry and wanting to be great and having aspirations is like that, where all the young guys are like that. They party hard, they're larger than life. It's really it's an era that a lot of us go through. And you're right. I mean, it was almost like semi-autobiographical, because I had a couple of friends or even family members that saw the movie and said, oh, that's the best role we've ever seen you in. And I said, why is that? And they said, because it was you. I think that's what a lot of actors are searching for. They're looking for a role that's kind of emulating them somewhat. so they can get on the map. I saw this with Vin Diesel, like he was struggling in his very early days. At some point he said, you know what? I'm just going to do my own feature. I'm going to cast myself in it, make it, and show these bloody casting directors who I am and what I'm about. And he did, and he made that feature, and the rest is history. So it's really having the guts because, as we know, a lot of actors, they're very sensitive, they're very self-critical, always, I guess, not worrying but concerned about what other people are going to think, and you kind of have to because you're wondering whether your audience is going to like this performance or not. It does take a lot to say, you know what, I'm just going to do my own film and I'm going to promote myself and show you who I am. I think if you can do that as a starting point, you're really going to be ahead in the long term.
It seems as though that you really did put your heart and soul into this performance. Much can't be said for the other people, it seems. It seems as though everyone in this film is quite stale, in my opinion. That's
very interesting. What I want to ask you, though, because I know obviously, we're friends, we've done a lot of pods, you know my style.
Yeah.
But honestly, from an outsider's perspective looking in, do you think that it stands up? Because obviously that was now a long time ago. It was probably 15 years ago. Did you think that it was enjoyable now? Do you think it's a timeless film as far as these indies are concerned?
Yeah, it does stand out. It's mainly because of your performance, really. Because, it does. I'm sure you're your biggest fan in that respect because, yeah, it's really enjoyable watching you on screen. And also, as a character, you're rather interesting. You're not Jasper. You're not Jordan Rhodes. You're playing the stereotypical, 1980s cohort, the wingman, essentially. Right. And this seems to be like your ideal role. And it's a pity that there weren't more of these on the table because I think if there was a slightly bigger budget version of this film, it almost could have solidified you as an Australian version of Robert Downey Jr., which might have been a bad thing because you see what happens to his career right after the Party Boy role. Good things happen. But no, it stands out in that respect. Your scenes, there's a lot more life to them. I noticed that the Alison, what's her name? Alison Starr, I think.
Yeah, Joanna McKay.
She lets her guard down a lot more than with anyone else in the film. In fact, she's quite stiff in other scenes. But she's really good with you. It seems like she can let her guard down.
That's interesting you should say that because I guess, those acting classes that we'd had previously obviously shone through and you could see there was maybe a little bit of chemistry there as well because those characters were in a bit of a love-hate kind of relationship. I'm really glad that you picked up on that. That makes me feel good because what you just said really justifies the work that was put in, and that was a long time ago, man. So if you saw that coming through recently, then that's amazing. And Nick Levy will, as a writer-director, he's going to love to hear that.
Oh, he probably won't appreciate me saying how stiff everyone else is. I will say I'm happy to watch the film again, which is way more than I can say for a lot of other films. But yeah, and it was entertaining even without you in it. It still was actually quite okay.
I remember even Greg Packus, from Jugular, the actor, he'd seen it and he came up to me and he was just like, you know what, that's actually a really bloody good film. I know that made a big impression on him when he was starting out. I rember when Nick and I were in the city and he came past and was promoting one of his first works and we didn't know who he was, and he was like, oh, mate, Red Stammer, amazing. So it really, I think it did have an impact with a lot of people when it was made. And also, Levy's innovation, there's that animated character in it who we actually called Rad Sam. I don't know if you picked up on that. And, no one was doing that, man. No one was going out, to animation studios to get a character that would almost brand your movie. Levy was way ahead of his time in his actual concepts.
That was an interesting device, the samurai who would pop up every now and then, usually during one or two emotional moments. The one problem with that, it's not used consistently, which was really disappointing.
There is a reason for it because, to be brutally honest, he ran out of money. The character was supposed to be involved, integrated into the production a lot more on a grander level. It just didn't happen for money and technical reasons and time. So that's why it sort of became almost like a cut to. But the character was originally going to be a lot more involved. Did you notice on the T-shirts that Gene wears, he's actually got the Rad Sam print?
Yeah, I did see that as a missed opportunity, the Rad Samurai. He could have been used as almost like a Greek chorus and used really well. When he was used, he was essentially a Greek chorus. He was speaking to the audience. I mean, not speaking literally, but sort of gesturing to the audience and reacting to the inner emotions on screen. Aside from that, he's kind of cute, and I could see him as like a little bobblehead or a Nico toy.
Yeah, that's right. He's a classic bobblehead. I mean, it's pretty amazing, man. You look at this film and it's still up at an 8 out of 10 on the IMDb. I mean, that's pretty incredible, like after all this time. Normally, the ratings will drop just by default if there's no activity on the page, or at this stage of the game, it's almost become a dinosaur. But like, it's still up there high in the ratings. Probably the reason why we're able to secure Ozflix. So we got the Ozflix distribution, so you can now log in and watch it for $3-4 or something, which is incredible. And it also played on my Monday Midnight Madness on Channel 31 last year. It would played in with The Run. There's also an American version. I really want to talk about this, which Levy redid, which you can buy on Amazon. It's got another feature on it called This Is Hardcore. And This Is Hardcore was a phrase that became used on the set of the movie when we got into like the final days, because this was an epic 32-day straight shoot. I mean, this was the hardest shoot of my entire life, easily. And people dropped like flies. So when you got to the last few days, there was what they called the hardcore crew. So Nick kind of ran with that concept, and then he made the documentary on the making of the movie and he called it This Is Hardcore. And this documentary, I don't know, have you seen that one yet?
No, not yet.
This, I'm telling you right now, this is probably, aside from Hearts of Darkness, this is the best making of a film I've ever seen in my life.
Really?
Like, it's absolutely a knockout. We screened it at ACMI and it was a full house. There were over 500 people that came to that screening. It was epic. And it was after that I got my first ever piece of fan mail, which was from a guy that watched it in Ireland. And he wrote me a letter. Nathan Hill, dear Nathan, da-da-da-da-da, I saw the doco, da-da-da-da. Thank you so much for your honesty. So you can get it only on the DVDs though. Like, it's not online. So I was talking, I was like saying, can we put this on? And they're like, because they're only doing fictional film. This doco is so good that it should be compulsory to be in every film school in Melbourne. I'm not even kidding. It should be compulsory to watch that at Footscray City, RMIT, Deakin, hell, even VCA. Anybody that's going into first year film school has to watch this doco. Like, if you don't, you've missed out on Melbourne culture. It's that good and it's that important.
This is kind of an important film in terms of Melbourne culture around the turn of the century, because I recognise all the locations, but all the lingo as well as all of the behaviours of these people. It's, really a slice right out of Melbourne. No one's showcased Melbourne better than Nick Levy has. I mean, it's as simple as that. We're running down Collins Street in friggin' long johns. Yeah. Another character's walking down Swanston Street naked. You're at RMIT. You're at Fed Square. I mean, dude, you've seen it. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's really well done, those sequences. And it's weird how, like, it looks basically the same. It's so weird. Even the gardens where the Fitzroy Gardens. Very similar. Yeah. The other thing I was going to say just reminded me, when that movie premiered, it actually showed at the State Film Theatre, and it was technically the last film that played at the State Film Theatre before it became ACMI. Dude, that's epic trivia. Do you know how many movies have played at the State Film Theatre? Can you imagine how many? And this was the last. That's insane. I mean, this is what I mean. Like, there's so much history and there's so much more to not only Nick Levy's story, but mine and a lot of the movies that I've been involved in, particularly in the indie scene in Melbourne. Stories that haven't seen the light of day properly. Stories that, and history that exists. And I'm not really sure if people are aware or not, but they're landmark kind of, they're friggin' milestones is what they are. Yeah. Glad that we can talk about that now. It's important. Why do you think the film was called Radio Samurai? Well, I think the samurai part comes from the actual stage play that they do, the live on air radio show. The fact that the characters were these Japanese style characters, that's where you're kind of getting that part of it. And obviously the radio part's coming from the fact that it is about a DJ. So the whole movie is inspired by War of the Worlds anyway. And I think, that's where Nick's head was at. It was like, how do I make something grand scale that has been done before that I can kind of repackage or reinvent, and obviously War of the Worlds had an impact on him the same way The Lost Boys has on me. Do you know what I mean? So I think it all stemmed from that. What was amazing, though, was that I think I told you on one of our other pods that my first ever film, and I'm talking like when I was, young, was called The Samurai. It turned out that Nick's father, who was also a media professor at Deakin, Wayne Levy,
his first film was called The Samurai. So, we had this other connection, and I felt that it was only kind of poignant that his first feature became Radio Samurai. Like, it was just a very interesting observation that I had.
Okay, so obviously you can't, there's no crystal ball or periscope for you to look into Nick Levy's brain, but obviously you know him quite well. How does that sort of culture, that samurai culture, the Ronin culture, I guess, relate to both of you, the director Nick as well, also your character John Reese, and also maybe Gene Roseberry, Stuart Orr's character?
Look, I think, for me, obviously, I've bathed in the martial arts for so many years that it's kind of natural for me to talk about Japanese culture or even Japanese style of martial arts. I think for Nick, he's very versed and very learned in other cultures, and also he's a traveler. I mean, he's spent, time in just about every country in the world, and so I actually, as a nickname, I call him Indiana Levy. But I think also at that time, it was perhaps Japanese culture, or perhaps maybe the food or the clothes or the decor was also in fashion.
Yeah, I remember the first time I tried sushi in Australia was around 2001 when this film was probably being made.
Right. I think you're right. It was really, that's when it became more immersed in our local culture, and I think he kind of, capitalized on that as well.
That's what you want to do. You want a film to be that zeitgeisty.
I kind of put it in the same bag as Clerks and things like that.
Yeah.
But the thing
this is way more professional than Clerks.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because you look, I mean, it's funny you said it, because I think the same thing. It's absurd that you get a first feature like Clerks that's done so well because it's had the distribution power, but it's really a very, very basic film. You take something like Radio Samurai that's got multiple locations. It's extremely complicated. It's really epic scale to even, to attempt, but you don't get the backing. It's ironic, but I think I told you that when they were telecine, there was a lot of technical problems. It was really, because they shot in Super 16mm. And there were a lot of problems, and some of the guys sort of in camera department, it was also their first feature. So we did have a lot of technical difficulties, and I think it was Lee Mack that was doing the film transfer, was kind of a little bit worried about it. He said, look, I don't care. I'm going to finish this no matter what. It's my first feature. I don't give a shit, which is amazing that he fucking did. Lucky it'd end up in DVD. But if it was going to go that extra mile, there would have to be those technical checks. I mean, the thing with Clerks, I guess, is, for what it is, it's still clean. It's obviously got clean sound. It's kind of consistent. So, those basic things that some of which were in some areas where we were failing, that was probably the main reason.
It's a really good looking film. And it
goes up and down, though. There's some inconsistencies with the color grade, unfortunately, and that was sort of out of our hands. I think Nick was a bit heartbroken by some of it, because he's a perfectionist, and I think it drove him mad, because so much of it, as you said, is great, but then there's a lot of dirty areas, and I think those dirty areas really kind of got to him personally for a while. It wasn't until digital technology took over that he attempted to do his next film, which was many years later.
And Stuart Orr, he is obviously the lead in this film, and I guess his relationship with the Alison Starr character is what it's probably the B plot of the film, really, when you think about it. The main plot
it's the
being
B plot. That's right, because A plot is him trying to get his job back by putting on the show, and the B plot is the girlfriend.
You kind of put a coin on the rails, in a sense, with having a sort of affair with Alison Starr. But
we basically made out, the characters made out, and then I invited her into my bedroom, but at the last second, she had a conscience. I pushed it as far as any best mate character could, in a sense, but right at the last minute, and then she sort of feels guilty after that, and she runs and hides and feels terrible about it. But then John Reese obviously gets into trouble with the French girl that he's impregnated, who comes back from France, and then he's hook, line, and sinker. So there's no way he's going to pursue Alison anyway. But that was the funny thing about the character John, because he would push the envelope, but that's just kind of who he was. He didn't have to make an excuse for it. That's why he was a funny guy.
I don't want to understate how funny this character is, because I really do want people to go out there and see.
The thing that I loved was there was this one shot. Tell me if you can remember. I'm sitting on a couch, and Gene and Allison are having an argument, and Gene sort of goes to kiss Allison, but then he realizes John's looking at him, and he looks over, and John kind of slowly turns his head from he's sitting on the couch, and he has this really kind of cheeky grin, and it was this classic, just sort of,
yeah.
And I actually had someone come up to me and say, "Oh my God, that shot, you look like Tom Cruise." And I was just like, yes.
Yeah, you had the sort of like the winning smile there.
Yeah,
but that actually comes. I think that the moment before that is my favorite moment in the film, where you guys are brainstorming. You were telling me that, I think over Messenger, you were telling me that it was a 24-hour shoot that day, and you were at the very end of it. Tell us about that day.
Oh my God. Yeah, I think it was a 20-hour shift. And it was the hardest day I've ever had on a film set. I mean, even on Queen of the Damned, but this was just so grueling, because when you're working on film, it moves slower, as opposed to video.
Well, because video never stops running.
Yeah. So, Super 16mm multicam, big setups, but this is a true story. Carl Seaman, who's the DOP, absolute renegade legend of guy. On that day, on that 20-hour day, we were shooting at the Metro nightclub. And it was a fact he actually had the record amount of setups for a 16mm cam in the country ever. He actually broke a record, and he went back into Lemac and he said, we've had X amount of setups, and they just said, no, you're kidding. And he goes, no, I've broken the record, because there was this huge cheer in the crew, and he was just like, fucking done it. 32-day straight shoot, but on that day, they bagged 8 minutes of the movie, and that was the day I was flying through the air on wires, probably one of the biggest acting days of my life.
And working with Stuart Orr, because it's strange, because you two actually look like leads in a feature film, and that's usually, I don't see that usually in a lot of...
I'm really glad you said that, because I've been watching a couple of indies lately, and I've been really let down with the fact that I don't know where the directors' heads are when they cast. They're just kind of like, oh yeah, get him, and they haven't looked at the overall poster. Casting is such an art form, I do it, and I even had a hand in bloody casting Radio Samurai, if you look at it technically. You have to have an aesthetic. You can't have, 3 redheads in a lead. Right? It just doesn't work. Nick had spent a lot of time on these 3 lead characters, and it's funny, Seb, because did you notice that Stuart was blonde, but I was a brunette?
Yeah.
And this was really strange because, I came in as a natural blonde, he came in as a natural brunette, and then Nick flipped it. I always felt that was a really kind of smart thing that he did. And, back then too, we are talking 15 years ago, there weren't many actors in Melbourne that were even male actors that I saw dyeing their hair or even growing cubes. How I had the little cube, or they weren't even doing it. I mean,
cube on the face, you should specify. Yes.
Cube on the face. Thank you. So basically a little goatee. I dyed my friggin' eyelashes, for God's sake. My eyelashes, my eyebrows, the cube on under my bottom lip was even dyed. We were doing some pretty crazy stuff, but it did really help cement the characters. It really helped you get into the character. And I didn't see any other guys doing that. And I think Red Sam had a gloss to it. It had a commercial gloss to it that with a little bit more money, as you said, could have gone really through the roof.
Well, that money probably only needed to have been spent on the distribution and the advertising, because I've seen less polished films and even way less entertaining films get out there and make it big. Especially Australian ones, which I'm not going to mention.
No, let's not. But I will talk to you about a couple of other people.
Please do.
It's an interesting film. Looking back on it, even tonight as we've been talking, we also had the amazing Dennis Cord, who played the Alfred character, the old drunk, the writer. Yeah. Dennis was amazing too, because he was a home and away powerhouse. I'd watched him on telly. He was, he played the dad on Home and Away for years, probably even a decade. He was part of the furniture. So having sort of a big wig from Home and Away and then having Brooke as the big wig from Neighbours really did give us those legs that we needed. Yeah. And he was amazing, and he actually personally came up to me at the end of the screening, and he came up to me, sort of shook me with both hands, and he was like, "Nate, you're incredible, buddy. You're amazing." And I was just like, whoa, coming from him. He said, "Mate, I've got to get you my agent. I've got to get you up to Sydney." He goes, you've got it. Whatever it is, you've got it. And I just thought that was amazing. What a boost of confidence that was that I needed as a young guy. But also Thomas Caldwell was in there, who played Randy, the villain character character. Did you recognise Tom at all?
No.
Okay. Well, you can look him up later because he's definitely a guy that's been on the scene for a long time around Melbourne. He's an interviewer and he used to be on Pluck on that Channel 31 show, and he's done heaps of stuff. He's even doing stuff for Ozflix now as well. But he's a media personality. I think he might even be on the panel at Myth. There was a few powerhouses in there. Basically, what I'm trying to say is there were guys in there that sort of became somebody. It wasn't that sort of indie film where, one guy made it and the other 59 went nowhere. There's another girl in there, Niobe Dean. She was right in a spotlight at that time, and she'd done a fanfare film for Star Wars. Yes. Called The Broken Allegiance. Are you aware of the fanfare films?
No.
Okay. So George Lucas used to give the fanfare filmmakers the rights to use the Star Wars name, the music, et cetera, the characters, without making profit. So they made a legitimate Star Wars fanfare film that got some airtime, but they weren't allowed to profit from it. She was the lead female in that. We had her in Rad Sam in a little support role. So she was another classic character. Also, did you know that Pauline Grace is in there?
Yeah, our good friend Pauline, she hasn't changed a bit.
Isn't it amazing? Like, she really hasn't changed much, has she?
No.
In more than a decade, she looked very similar. I just bumped into her again only about a year or so ago and didn't realise she was in Melbourne, and I think it was Innuendo that I saw her in. It was really nice to see her. There was a classic thing that Nick did as well in pre-production. He actually, and now if you think about crowdfunding now, this was way before crowdfunding existed, right? He did a raffle with his business name. He created a genuine raffle. Win yourself an extra part in the movie. It might have been a couple of dollars a ticket or something like that. There was like 1,000 tickets that he sold or something like that. When he drew the name out of the hat, my sister won. He was almost embarrassed. He thought I would think he's lying. And he kind of rings out and he's like, Nate, I've done the raffle. And I'm like, oh, yeah, awesome, man. Who won? Who's coming on set? And he's just like, Sarah. And I'm like, Sarah who? He's like, Hill. And I'm like, what? Bullshit. So I swear to God, man, he goes, I've got a witness. I pulled it out of the hat. She won. I said, dude, that is just meant to be. My sister had been on TV. I think I told you she'd been on like an episode of Double Dare. And then she did Rad Sam and she won a little extra part. She actually ended up becoming a featured extra, which was cool. So that was good for her too, because then that led into Tomboys. The only really sad thing about Rad Sam as casting goes, one of the lead guys actually died after. His name was Paul Javier. Paul played, the disc jockey that was in a lot of scenes with Gene. This guy was just such a legend, such a great guy. And he had a really big commercial straight after. I remember he played an Eskimo. And I think it might have been for like Eskimo Pie or something like that. Great guy. And we used to like recite lines from Predator when we used to see each other. Or, I'd go up to him and I'd pretend to light a cigar and I'd just, because he'd go, oh, how you going, man? How's your day going? And I'd just go, and I'd say, when I was in Nam. It was this ongoing joke, it's just a tease, because everyone would be talking serious technical stuff, and you'd just be getting sick of it. So he and I, we would have this kind of, I guess, sparring and banter to each other, and he was a lot of fun. But fortunately, this guy, he was only 30 and he got pneumonia and he went into hospital, but he went into hospital a bit later than when he'd caught it, and he actually died. So we kind of, we're all a little bit affected by that because he was a very well-known guy in Melbourne.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, he did have quite a personality.
Yeah, real presence. Yeah, and just to mention a little bit about the crew as well, I know I talked about Carl Seaman before, but there's also Cameron McCulloch who was on set, and he was on second unit, and he's gone on to become a well-known short filmmaker as well in Melbourne. He's doing really well at the moment. He's sort of come back from the grave, so to speak. I think he was on hiatus for a long time. He's doing really well. So he was on our second unit. And then there was another guy who was on sound, which was Aaron McKim, and he's now gone on to do really great work. In fact, he did the sound on Snowtown and also Red Hill. Well, Aaron was our friggin' boom operator. He's probably one of the most successful from that Rat Pack that we had on that shoot. And I actually recently discovered that he's actually doing the score for Cold Girls.
That's insane. That's like,
isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
So I actually bumped into him amazingly at a restaurant like only about a week ago, and we discovered we live near each other. And I just thought, this is ridiculous.
Let's get briefly back to the shooting. So what were some of, I guess, the more challenging scenes to shoot in terms of acting?
It sounds funny, but, playing that Casanova and all the rest of it, there was challenges for me, particularly some of the girls that that had, because I do kiss Joanna, her character, and I also kissed Lauren. I think there was the two girls, and they both had boyfriends at the time. And, it wasn't that smooth as you would think. Just remember looking at Joanna and thinking she's so stunning. She'd been a cosmopolitan model, for God's sake. She'd been in the magazine cover and stuff like that. And I thought she's so attractive. But when we actually went to do the scene, and it's funny you said that we had a good chemistry. I think we acted well together, but when we went to do the kissing scene, it was didn't really work out. It was a little bit awkward, and I don't know if that was egos or whether it was a bit of an uncomfortableness or, come from her or me. I can't remember all of the dynamics, but it just wasn't as simple as I would have thought. And during that process, being a first feature, I realized that every movement you do is kind of critical. Even the kiss, it actually had to be coordinated. You might have one way of kissing and then she's got a different way of kissing. And then when you kiss, maybe sometimes it doesn't actually match, and you just, because people have different style and everyone's different. So that was really interesting, breaking that down, how to make it look natural. But every movement, you can see it on the screen, like when you blow it up to the big screen, everything you're doing, people can see it, so you've got to get it right. So the angles, the movements, the this and that, and I'm not just talking about kissing now, I'm talking about everything, every move on camera. There's some challenges there to really make things look authentic. And believe me, man, you don't really remember those moments. They happen very quickly, and you've got, 100 people. There was 100 people on set on Radio Samurai every day. You're always under the spotlight, and you just got to keep moving. You don't really have time to stop and think about too much. And I will say this too, as far as it being an important film on the map, I had friends even in film school and guys that were ahead of me. In fact, one guy that's a really well-known DOP now we're really high up the chain, who said, Radio Samurai was one of the first jobs he ever saw advertised for a feature in Melbourne. It really was that big. There's people that I know now that have got, fully fledged careers and they're shooting professional movies. And this was like one of the first movies they ever saw being pitched. That's how iconic it was at the time. And Nick made page 1 of the EG and the Age. I think Tom Kearney, who was the production designer, and he's a whole other force of his own. I remember him coming up to me, being introduced after I'd been cast, and he just sort of walked straight up to me, and he was almost like he was going to help us, I don't know, with wardrobe or something. I don't know what he was going to do, but he was going to work with us. And he sort of shook my hand and shook Stuart's hand, and he goes, "Wow, you guys are actually celebs." I remember that being the first time someone said that to me. That was really cool.
What about the aftermath of shooting Radio Samurai and even the aftermath of distribution?
Well, I'd always hoped that Stuart was going to do more, but Stuart kind of stopped acting. Stuart did Radio Samurai, and then he did a little bit of Razor Eaters, which was another film that Carl Seaman shot. And then Carl after that shot another film called Submerged. Carl did really well because he went from Rad Sam to Razor to Submerged. Stuart was interesting because he'd gone from Rad Sam to another film that I'm going to talk about in a minute called Scam, and then he went to Razor Eaters, but then he kind of stopped. So I'm not sure why. I don't know if it was personal reasons. I mean, I know he stayed in contact with Cam McCulloch, and I talked to Cam and often asked him about Stuart and how he's doing, and he said, look, he just doesn't – he likes theatre, but he's not as much into film. People go different ways. Joanna, as I said, I think she was more concentrating on her music and her life in other areas, so she kind of stopped as well. You found out who was really in it for the long haul or not. Yeah. There were a lot of people in the movie that realised they don't want to do film, and that's a good thing. They found out within a month whether they want to do this for the rest of their life or not. And there's no other greater film school. I mean, it's the best crash course you'll ever get in your life when you're doing something that scale. It was really good to see the rushes. The rap party for that was still, oh my God, right up there. The rap party on Radio Samurai and Coin of the Damned, probably the two best rap parties I've ever had. The longer the shoots are and the more involved you are, the better the rap. Yeah, I was happy with my performance. I was happy with a lot of the shots. However, I was a young guy. I wasn't that healthy, I must admit. My diet was pretty bad, and I was still young and learning the ropes, and, I was very skinny in that movie. I was already a very skinny guy, but my diet wasn't great. So, physically I was kind of failing in a lot of the scenes. So I do have those sort of cringe-worthy moments, but you can't pick on yourself too much because, if you're just a young guy starting out, everyone has their It has their ups and downs. I'm really proud of it. Just getting the movie packaged, man. It's a very important thing. As a lead, I couldn't really be happier, man. It was an incredible trial by fire, is what it was. After you go on that sort of experience, you also realize how hard it is to get quality work. And I had a lot more respect for actors, like professional actors in movies where people have done the real work. I understood it better after that. And I think, the thing for Nick as well, Nick Levy, taking on such a task and such a challenge, it's a testament to him this movie even really exists. I think there were times where it could have been abandoned. The budget ran out and then he was borrowing more money. He's the reason it's been finished. The This Is Hardcore documentary, as I said, is just like incredible. It's a must-see. Some people even said the doco is better than the movie. That's how good it is. Our friendships, if it wasn't for Rad Sam, he and I wouldn't have done How to Be a Sex Star, a mockumentary that opened the Australian Film Festival. So
I think we should wrap this up. How about you?
Man, I'm happy. Yep.
Nathan Hill, thank you very much once again, and hopefully we'll talk again soon, mate. Your first big role.
Seth. Thanks for listening.
This series was produced by Sebastian Mittelman and devised by William Thompson and Sebastian Mittelman. Stay alive till next time. Oh, and a very special thanks to our associate producer Nathan Hill.